Finally, Amazon decided the fate of the Rings of Power. Surprise, they renewed it for a third season. Honestly, it's not that much of a surprise. Amazon spent $2 billion getting the TV rights for The Lord of the Rings and making the Rings of Power. They're not canceling this show unless the viewership is literally in single digits. I'm not even sure how Amazon factors in the profitability of the series, since the company makes money in so many different sectors. But The Hollywood Reporter says, quote, "The first season of The Rings of Power remains Amazon Prime's biggest TV premiere, while the second season is the streamer's most watched returning season by numbers of hours watched. Amazon says 170 million viewers worldwide have checked out the show, and it's been one of the strongest drivers for new Prime membership signups." I can't disprove that claim, but I have a hard time believing that The Rings of Power was a big draw for new Prime memberships, since Season 2 brought in fewer viewers than Season 1. The company Illuminate tracked the data, and according to their report, as you can see on screen, The Rings of Power lost 60% of its viewers from Season 1 to Season 2. The show's numbers were on par with Loki and Secret Invasion, and based on other data from the report, somewhere in the same range as Percy Jackson and The Acolyte. Lots of shows take a dip in viewers season to season, but this is a big dip. You get vertigo looking down at this dip. In fairness though, if The Rings of Power doesn't pull in a massive audience, Amazon could kind of write that off. $2 billion is a hell of a loss, but for a $2.5 trillion company, Amazon's current market value, that's barely a drop in the pond. I doubt anyone at Amazon wants the show to bomb, but it ultimately isn't constrained by the same incentives as other shows. It also doesn't seem to have the same audience, since a lot of its supposed fans clearly didn't turn out for Season 2, and barely anybody talks about the show. You'd think with all the hardcore fans Amazon claim loved the show that we'd be tripping over articles and videos about the end of Season 2 and what might happen in Season 3, but no, it's been pretty quiet. Speaking of the next season, according to The Hollywood Reporter, Season 3 will feature a time jump. They provided the log line for the season, quote, "Jumping forward several years from the events of Season 2, Season 3 takes place at the height of the War of the Elves and Sauron, as the Dark Lord seeks to craft the one ring that will give him the edge he needs to win the war and conquer all of Middle-earth at last." I said years ago that the showrunners should use time jumps to simplify the story because of how much time passes between events. The idea was to skip over long periods, decades, in some cases hundreds of years, where nothing major happens. Time jumping into a war, however, creates a new set of problems because now they have to reset the board so everyone knows what's going on in the war and explain what everyone's been up to since the previous season. Remember, there are only 8 episodes per season, so this would easily take up 1 or 2 episodes for a normal show with a typical cast size. But also remember that they've got several different groups to keep track of: the Elves, the Southlanders, the Númenóreans, the Dwarves, the Hobbits, the Wizards, and Sauron. That's 7 groups to track, more if you count when the groups split up. They're making it harder on themselves than they need to, and they're kind of forgetting all the storylines were left on cliffhangers. They just gonna hop, skip it, and jump past that to get to the war? You just gonna leave all them dangling plot lines to try to clean up in the middle of a war story while also trying to handle 7 different story arcs at once? Okay, that's bold. That is bold. But I will give them credit. They are consistently inexplicable. Why would you do this to yourselves? It's just a headache you don't need to have. And keep in mind, some of the story arcs don't intersect. The Wizards and Hobbits have nothing to do with the main plot. They're just there. And when you get to the main plot, the remaining 5 groups split into subgroups with their own subplots, all crammed into 9 hours of TV. It's just madness. If they were going to have all those story arcs crammed into a show and then try to do a time jump, they should have wrapped up the cliffhangers at the end of Season 2 so that they wouldn't have all these dangling plot lines. But that makes sense, and like I've said before, this ain't that kind of show. Instead, they're going to plow their way into a war story with no real setup. It's almost like the people in charge have never run a show before. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.